across a various range of countries, point-to-multipoint turned out to be the most cost-effective solution. And when we tried to get cost inputs that were about middle of the road for most countries, we found out that there was a 49% savings of point-to-multipoint over traditional microwave point-to-point. So unless you have your own network and you have a very cheap access to fiber, fiber is by far the most expensive solution, 7 times as expensive as wireless. There is a big difference between point-to-point and point-to-multipoint. So whether you use microwave or E-band for point-to-point, they tend to be more expensive. Not because the equipment is more expensive. The equipment cost is pretty much comparable, and it's actually not that important because it's a very, very small part of the overall cost if you look at the total cost of ownership, capex and opex. But the difference is in the amount of equipment that you need, and that's really driving the advantage of point-to-multipoint over point-to-point across the board. So basically, I think that the way to think about it is the following. Because you need less equipment with point-to-multipoint, you tend to have cost savings that expand throughout the total cost of ownership model. So the equipment cost is lower, the cost of installing the equipment is lower. Then also time to market, but that's sort of a non-cost item. So from the capex, it's clearly lower. But then when you go to opex, the cost savings are even bigger, substantially bigger, because you have to manage, operate, fix if there are problems, pay lease on a much lower number of sites where you have equipment. So what that means is that the point-to-multipoint solution is consistently cheaper than point-to-point. Now, one thing to remember is that this logic holds regardless of what are your costs for a spectrum installation. So as we discussed before, there is a lot of variability in terms of cost across different countries. But this logic stays true regardless, because even if let's say spectrum is free, completely free, but you still have the equipment cost and the leasing cost. So it really doesn't matter in what country you operate. This kind of approach this kind of result is consistently valid throughout. And so point-to-multipoint really allows you to have a wireless backhaul that is cheaper both in terms of capex and in terms of opex.